and then we'll move along to Sebastian Müller, who looks ready, who will be talking about mostly live streamed teaching with a visualizer. Okay, take it away, Sebastian.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So both for organizing this very helpful series of workshops and also for giving me the opportunity to speak. So I'd like to talk about mostly live stream teaching with a visualizer. So I want to give a little plug that I find it very helpful if there's a possibility to have a good amount of synchronous teaching during the present situation. So it allows to interact with the students, and I think it has benefits for mental health. So it's the closest to what the students are used to, and allows them to stay in contact to some degree. And I think it has relatively few disadvantages for students who prefer asynchronous learning. So the students are divided in what they prefer most, but the students who prefer pre-recorded videos can also still always watch the recording if it's uploaded quickly. And what I'm going to talk about is based on experience with 3 units. So one final year, two final year units, 4th year units with 30 and 13 students, and then one second year unit with 141 students. And the live audience in these sessions was about half. So it was slightly less in the largest unit, which I blame on the 9 AM slots at least. And in the smallest units, it was considerably, I mean, it was consistently more than half of the students attending live. And the technology that I used is that I used a visualizer, and I had 2 sheets of paper in front of me, and I was sort of broadcasting live what I was writing on these sheets. And the reason for having 2 sheets was actually that it allowed me to refer back to stuff that I had written before, which was the thing that I was missing most from using a Blackboard. And then, I mean, I used Zoom for these sessions, and there are 2 ways that one could use to connect the visualizer in Zoom. So the thing that is a little bit easier, but that I didn't do, is to go via share screen, advanced, and content from second camera. What I was using instead was that I used OBS, which I think has been mentioned at a previous Talmo workshop, and which is also something that is used by YouTubers. So this allowed me to merge the output from the visualizers with the picture taken by the camera in my monitor, and merge that as the output of a virtual camera. And then this is the thing that I was using in Zoom. So the advantage of this was that I can decide how large my own picture should be, and I felt a little bit larger view would be helpful to engage the students and to have more contact with them. And the other advantage was that I can tie it in a better way with any other features of OBS. So for example, when I was showing simulations in the partial differential equations lecture, so I'm just here having a quick view of the interface of OBS. So I can see there that you can add different sources. So like the camera output and size it. And there are also different scenes that I can switch between. So when I show a simulation during the lecture, I can do that with a different scene. So one reason for using the visualizer was that it makes it more credible to interact with the students because I can write down something based on what they just told me. I don't have to show something pre-prepared. Another interactive thing I've used a lot are Zoom polls. So here you see an example where sort of in the middle they're supposed to discover that the separation constant when solving PDEs by separation of variables is really constant. And I spent some time discussing the polls. So for example, which potential misconceptions could have led to the wrong answers. and I mean, encouraged questions from students during the lecture and in the session publicly for the others in the end of the lecture, and also always said in the end of the lecture, I'm staying behind if they want to ask any individual questions. So this was taken up reasonably well. I mean, I felt that the questions were clustered to where it was hardest. So I could have half an hour without questions, and then suddenly 4 questions about the conceptually most difficult thing of the lecture, but that looked like a reasonable use of questions for me from the students. And I also asked questions to the students to which they could answer both typing or speaking. Usually they prefer to type. So this was my main form of interaction for the problem classes for the smaller course. I was actually a bit worried whether this can be interactive because students didn't have their cameras on and so on, but they were quite active typing answers. And I mean, one experience is that asking questions that lend themselves to a short typed answer that triggers more answers. And I had to wait for the answer even to come through the technology. And I felt that it was actually, I find it easier to wait for the answers because I didn't have the visual clue. No one is going to answer that question. So I was really waiting. And then the students were answering. So in terms of, I already mentioned in the smaller course, they didn't have their cameras on. So I usually said in the beginning of the course, it would be nice if some students could switch their camera on so that it looks for me more like I have an audience, but I didn't insist on that. So for the large and the medium course, some had their camera on. For the smallest one, I don't think there was a quorum, and no one wanted to be the only one to have their camera on. And I found it helpful to have eye contact with the camera. So I think something like that was mentioned before. So it's a bit dangerous to just look at the sheet of paper or at an iPad using different technology. So I consciously looked up to the camera whenever I was not writing, and I also tried to have the setup such that I have a little bit of eye contact even while writing. And I use pre-recorded material to have more time for problems in the live sessions. And that was a bit to different degree in the different courses I taught. So for quantum chaos, first one of these that I taught, I had quite large amount of pre-recorded material. And then basically a half-flipped classroom, so slightly more than half of the live sessions were problem classes. I felt that worked well, but it also led to a lot of back and forth between live lectures and pre-recorded material. So I think it's helpful to have if mixing synchronous and asynchronous, it's helpful for the pre-recorded things to be either a larger self-contained block or something that is clearly an addendum. And then in the largest course, I maybe should have just used that a little bit more. And for advanced quantum theory, I had the flexibility to add more contact hours. So that was, in addition to using a small amount of videos, that was a way to make more time for engaging with problems. And okay, one more thing I want to mention is that I think it helps to show some empathy for the students, including the situation they are in currently. So I was not planning this consciously, but I think in particular in the largest course, I sometimes made remarks, including about my choice, why I'm teaching in this format. And when I saw the questionnaire results, I think this helped to connect with the students, including sort of showing some empathy for their situation. And then the final thing that I want to mention is not a success story at the moment, but I want to pass on the idea and maybe get some suggestions actually. So I did the office hour, not in Zoom, but in something called AirMeet. And this is an interface with different tables. So I was sitting at one of the tables and the students could ask me questions there. And I had encouraged the students to go to the other tables and there form study groups to work together. And this was not really taken up, so they were just using it as a normal office hour. But if any people have other ideas to go with it or suggestions how to make it work more, that might be helpful. And for further details, I have a link to my homepage where I give some further steps, in particular technical steps about OBS and some Python script that adds animations to handwritten slides. And I will put something in the chat from colleagues who had experience with breakout rooms and interactive boards in the breakout rooms. And that's what I wanted to say. So thank you.